This is Sheila with the task force, Sheila Jacobs. I just want to say how much I appreciate Cheryl and Amos's leadership in this task force. And I'm moved to tears with all that is going on, and that this is the one sane place in my life, is having been involved with this task force since the first meetup, February 2019. And thank you everybody for being a part of this incredible opportunity that I do not know why there's not thousands, yet millions already joining us, but I know we are leading, and I appreciate everybody here. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Councilmember Cheryl Davila, Berkeley City Council District 2. Welcome to the virtual summit series. This is our second one on fossil-free Bay Area. As you may know, our office introduced in June 18 an item, declare a climate emergency and a fossil-free city resolution, which passed unanimously. And since then, 1,747 people governments around the world have declared a climate emergency. And what are we in? A climate emergency. We have smoke, we have COVID-19, and now we have hurricanes and tornadoes across the country. So I just wanted to welcome everyone here. We're in tumultuous times. We have to remember to love ourselves, care for ourselves in this time, eat properly, wear our masks, physically distance. So I wanted to thank everyone for being here. I'm honored and humbled to be the chair and founder of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force. And I wanted to thank Jack Fleck from 350 Bay Area and Steve Nadell from Sunflower Alliance for all their leadership in this fossil-free Bay Area series today. And then I also wanted to thank all the panelists, all the speakers, the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force and Steering Committee, and all of you, because it takes all of us to make a change. I hope you're doing as well as can be during these times. And I would also like to thank, or just to give you a little bit of information about the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force. We're a coalition of elected officials, city and county staff, youth, environmental activists, CBOs, and NGOs, and frontline communities addressing the inequalities and causes of climate emergency. Our purpose is to advance the economic and social justice goals in combination with the level of environment and climate policies necessary to address our current crisis. We're in a crisis right now, and that's why we're here, to talk about ways that we can move together and deal with the catastrophe that faces us. So welcome everyone, and now we're going to be hearing a land acknowledgement from an amazing woman, Karina Gould. Thank you everyone for being here. Take it away, Karina.
Thank you, Councilman Cheryl, and good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful morning, and I thought we would do what I began to do is we look at the land that we're on, and we hope that that we call in our ancestors from whichever lands that they come from to help us with the important work that we're about to do today. And I want to thank Councilman Cheryl and all of the people that have come to create this task force. As Council person Cheryl talked about, is that we are in this amazingly difficult time in the world right now, and we have to make some changes. And I'm so happy to know that in the city of Berkeley that this is happening, that there's conversations that are happening, and that we're not going to freeze, but we're actually going to move forward to do something. So this is the land of my ancestors, the place that we have always been. We are the Lashawn people. Our territory goes all the way up to the Carquinez Strait, out to Highway 5 and down to San Jose. And we are in the particular territory of Huchin, the place where it now encompasses Oakland, Alameda, Berkeley, Emeryville, Albany, and Piedmont. And I want to call all of our ancestors in today to help us to do this important work about saving ourselves as human beings. What we know from our traditional teachings is that the earth will continue on without us. But as right now, we have the important duty of trying to save this beautiful place for the next 7 generations and beyond. And so I'm going to ask everybody if they would take 4 breaths with me. And as we're taking in this first deep breath, we want to thank the air that it opens up our lungs and nourishes our bodies and our cells. And we ask the air to come back to us in clean forms for the next 7 generations and beyond. The next breath of air that we want to take in is we want to take in fresh air to also ask for blessings and protections over our waters. The waters that fall from the sky, we want to ask for the waters of the oceans, the seas, the creeks, the lakes, the streams, the mists, the fogs, but also we want to ask for the temperament of the hurricanes that come to please slow down their strength and not to harm those that live on this earth. So we take in a deep breath and we blow it out together. We want to thank our relatives that are our medicines, our plants that are giving us food. We want to ask the earth to continue to create nourishment in the soils so that we can have fresh food and good medicines for the next 7 generations and beyond. So we take a deep breath in. And for this last one, we want to ask for our ancestors to come and to continue to hold us up from below and from above, from the sides of us, from in front of us and behind us, to continue to do the hard work that we must do with good hearts and good minds and good bodies, and that we take care of each other and ourselves in the best way possible during this time. We take a deep breath and let it go. I want to thank each and every one of you for the incredible work that you're doing. Thank you, Councilperson Cheryl Davila, for inviting me to be a part of this morning.
Thank you so much. It's always such a blessing to have you be with us. Thank you so much. So the current state of the fossil fuel industry has created unprecedented financial health risks to the city's frontline communities. These concerns require immediate action. COVID-19 crisis has financially strained the fossil fuel industry since there was a sudden dramatic drop in consumption of fossil fuels, and there is no better opportunity than now to work towards a just transition to a regenerative economy. We must be united to create lasting change. We must do it now for our children, for our grandchildren. Please join us, join me in a call and response in your own space. Say no to gas drilling. Say no.
No to
Say
gas
no to
drilling.
fracking. No to coal.
No to fracking.
No to coal.
No to coal.
Keep it in the ground.
Keep it in the ground.
Yes, that's right. So thank you. And now we're going to hear from Eduardo Martinez.
It's going to be a great day. There's a lot of information to be shared, and we'll be breaking up into various plenaries. At the beginning, we'll have let's see. Greg Karras will be doing decommissioning refineries. Janet Johnson will be doing air quality and environmental justice. And Andres Soto will be doing power mapping the air district. So that'll, oh, I see that that's going to be a one after the other from 9:20 on. Oh, and I can't forget Amos White.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amos White. I'm Vice Chair of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force. I want to thank everyone for being here today as well. And thank you, Chairwoman Davila, for convening this and really having the inspiration and vision to help move the region together forward on such an initiative. And to the program committee, Jack, Steve, et al., for pulling this together. Thank you for that introduction and overview, Eduardo. I've had the pleasure myself to give everyone an overview of our past, let you know a little bit about our past seminar that we most recently did. As you know, this is our second virtual summit from the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force. Our first one was July 24th, about a month ago. It was called Sustainable and Healthy Cities. At that, it was a phenomenal turnout as this one is today. And we hope you continue to invite others who are in the movement, working with frontline communities, impacted communities, or if you're a sustainability officer or an elected official, an environmental officer or someone in staff working on implementing and or shaping your climate action plan or your climate action and resiliency plan, then you need to be a part of this. At our first virtual summit, we had a wonderful set of panels. We had a panel on city and regional planning and housing, where they discussed planning and transit-oriented solutions, talked about affordable housing, but affordable housing without displacement. Public transit having to do with biking and walking and other modes of mobility. And it was a very engaging panel. We also had a second panel on ecological protection. That one really focused on, it was led by Shannon Biggs and Penny Opal Plant. And it focused on protection of land and water and defending the rights of nature. And that was another good panel that we did have. Second, our third panel that we had was focused on the Green New Deal and the just recovery and social justice. That one, just as it says, Green New Deal, it covered also healthcare as a right for all and racial and economic justice. Terry Lynn Chin of APEN participated with that, as did, I think, a representative from Assemblymember Brabanta's office, Dr. Robert Gould with Physicians for Social Responsibility, and Dr. Henry Abrams were on board. And that was a very engaging, as well as someone from Youth versus Apocalypse, Carrie Ramirez, were engaged in that panel. Our fourth of 6 panels we had was on resiliency. And that really did focus on building model sites for like permaculture and resilience and building solidarity across divides of race, class, sector, and region. That was led by Susan Silber. Colin Miller of OCAC in Oakland participated with that one. And so did Dr. Aisha Mays of Roots Community Clinic, along with Brianna Schaefer of Daily Acts. Our fifth panel last time was funding and public finance, public banking, and other areas and ideas that to actually provide funding for racial and climate justice. That was hosted by Jackie Fielder of Public Bank San Francisco, and Sylvia Chi with APEN participated in that, as well as Warren Lenny of Health and Climate Resilience, City Tax Measure Campaign of 2020. The last panel that we did have specifically focused on defund the police. We all know about the tumult of what we're in right now, in really what is a racial revolution here in the United States, as it is also supported and going on globally. We brought that into this to really look at those dynamics within a climate framework. So that really focused on half of, like looking at what does reallocation mean, where half of our city's budgets are currently going to the police, and how can that money be better spent to serve our communities. Nell Myhand of the Poor People's Campaign, Bay Area chapter, helped lead that, along with Nelsie Batista, former Bernie Sanders for President, East Bay Regional Campaign Manager. Along with her, with them was Christine Molina, who's a Latino program coordinator of the Bay Area Women Against Rape. And those were our 6 panels that we did have in our last virtual summit. This one is another exciting opportunity for all of you to engage, to exchange information, really listen deeply to what's being presented to you and think about how does that apply to you in the work that you're doing, but also think about who's not at the table. Who's not at the table where you are and who's not at the table in your region or in your domain, whose voices need to be included when we're talking about impacted communities, when we're talking about frontline organizations and workers. And how can those have, how can we better create collaborations and communication exchanges so that we can bring or focus, if you will, center them within our climate action plans and our climate planning. Really looking forward to having a very engaging group of panels today with all of you and amongst all of you. And that's the wrap up for that. Next up, as Eduardo said, we're gonna hear a little bit from today's panelists. First off, we have Greg Karras, who will be presenting on decommissioning the refineries. After Greg is done, Janet Johnson will be talking about air quality and environmental justice. So when Greg's done, Janet, please feel free to step in and introduce yourself. Following that will be Andres Soto, my brother in crime. Andres will be speaking on power mapping and air district. And then lastly, will be Eduardo, who will be talking about defunding the fossil fuel industry. They'll give you a brief overview of what each one of their panels are so you can get a little taster to decide which panel you really want to start off with. So with that, let's hear a little bit from Greg Karras. Greg?
Thank you, Amos. Greg Karras, Community Energy Resource. I'm one of the people who's doing the Decommissioning California Refineries workshop. We need to talk about how we're going to break free from our toxic relationship with oil before it takes us over a cliff. Put that formally, the scientific consensus that petroleum use must be cut rapidly to stabilize our climate, and proven alternatives to oil that we have now, which can meet this need, beg a question. What could reverse the political inertia that has stalled action to replace oil with sustainable alternatives? This is now the urgent question upon which the continued existence of human societies, as we know them, may depend. Yet little formal attention has so far been paid to the site-specific conditions that affect societal capacity to escape oil dependence in time. So research reported in Decommissioning California Refineries reveals specific answers to the parts of this urgent question framed by communities in the dominant oil refining state on the US West Coast. The question, or the parts of this question, what is the least impact, most socially just, most feasible path to climate and health protection in California? That, and even more importantly, what we can do about it here and now is the focus of this workshop. I'm the report author and will present its key findings. I'm honored to be joined by Claire Brown, an economist at UC Berkeley, and Steve Gary, a former refinery worker and refinery workers union leader, now retired. This month, Dr. Claire Brown joined more than 100 other top economists worldwide to call for building a more just, more sustainable world by ending the carbon economy now. I believe Claire was an organizer of this call to action. And in fact, it was oil, chemical, and atomic workers who first began to call for a just transition. That's part of what Claire and colleagues call for now. Steve Gary worked in refineries. Steve was a union local president and national policy rep with United Steelworkers. Last month, when we released Decommissioning California Refineries with the support of more than 100 organizations statewide, Steve joined our call for communities and workers to organize just transitions from oil to sustainable alternatives. We have some ideas for local action that we need your collective wisdom about. We need to talk about how we're going to break free from our toxic relationship with oil before it takes us over a cliff. Please join us.
Thank you, Greg. Susan, or excuse me, Janet Johnson.
Good morning, Janet Johnson, Sunflower Alliance. Thank you for joining us today. There's something I want to talk a little bit about environmental justice and air quality. There's something so basic, so utterly fundamental about the right to breathe clean air. And yet residents of frontline communities have always been denied that right. We know that Black and brown people in frontline communities have suffered more from the COVID-19 pandemic because their lungs have been weakened by constant exposure to harmful air pollution. We also know they experience shamefully bad health outcomes from the same polluters responsible for our climate emergency. We've assembled 6 outstanding advocates for air quality and environmental justice for our workshop this morning. I'm honored and excited to be here. And so I'd like to introduce the members of the Environmental Justice and Air Quality panel. First, we have Veronica Eady, who is the new Senior Deputy Executive Officer of Policy and Equity at BACMUD. She's come to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District from the CARB, the California Air Resources Board. And then we have Dr. Raymond Tompkins, a retired professor at San Francisco State, and he has done some original research in the field of disparate pollution impacts on Black residents of Bayview and Hunters Point. Ms. Margaret Gordon is co-director of West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project, which is the first community to build an action plan in 2017 in partnership with BACMUD under AB 617. Denise McCoy is the founder of Community Health and Environmental Justice in Sacramento. And Dr. Nama Raz Yassif is an environmental scientist affiliated with the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and she teaches at UC Berkeley. So we trust this workshop will enable you to learn, engage, and most of all, to take action in the fight for healthy, breathable air in the Bay Area. Thank you, and I'd like to turn it over to Andres Soto.
Thank you, Janet. Good morning, everybody. The workshop I will be participating in, I'm actually sharing it with Jed Holtzman, who's the policy guy for 350 Bay Area and attends more Bay Area Air Quality Management District meetings than anybody else I know. And he will be presenting a range of issues that we have to confront with the Air District. Our relationship as community advocates with the Air District has always been a challenging one. We have to push on them to try to get them to do their job, which is to protect our health and our air. And because it is a political entity, the oil industry is well represented there at the Air District as well, both by their association, Western States Petroleum Association, as well as the individual oil companies themselves and their allies in the building trades unions. So this is what we have to confront. So my presentation, my part of the presentation will be power mapping both the executive committee and the stationary source committee of the Air District. The executive committee obviously is important because they shape the direction of where the board is going. And then the stationary source committee is critical because they have jurisdiction over facilities such as the refinery, stationary source, a building, an industrial facility. And we need to know who the members are of these committees who are going to be making the votes. We need to know what areas they represent and how we can influence them. And so after we do the analysis of the relative power of individual board members, we're going to go into breakout groups based on regions, North Bay, South Bay, East Bay, West Bay, and we're going to organize ourselves within those groups to start targeting board members who are on these committees to make sure that they stand for the people's health, the people's safety, for pushing for decommissioning of the refineries, for enhancing monitoring, to allow the AB 617 process to, actually be community-led rather than staff-led. We need to let them know that many of the rules, like the fluid catalytic cracker rule about particulate matter, which impacts all of us, needs to focus on health first, not the relative cost effectiveness for the refineries. So at the end of it, we hope to have an action plan where everybody here, and I see there's 155 participants on this Zoom call, and we'll assume we got 125 who are willing to do something. We need to focus on these particular elected officials and let them know that their constituents demand that they represent them in the best possible fashion in these public arenas. And so we'll come out swinging. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I mean, Andres, and Andres didn't really introduce himself. Andres is a leader in the CBE Community for a Better Environment, as well as a voice for progressives on KPFA with his program, El Show de Andres Soto, which comes on Fridays. He's been a major force in Richmond politics, and he's been someone who has helped me understand the fossil dynamics in the city of Richmond. So
And he's a really great musician.
he's that too. He's a man of all seasons. We're going to be following up with a defunding the fossil fuel industry, and in the following workshops, we will be looking at what we can do to slow down and hopefully stop this climate emergency. And in order to do this, we need a roadmap to do so in a measured way, to have the least disruption in our transition to a just environmental and economic world. We need ways to hold the fossil fuel giants accountable for cleaning up the mess they've created in their debasing of the earth for their profits. So I'm really looking forward to this, and there's a lot of things that I'll be able to do as a council member in order to move forward in decommissioning California refineries and having a voice at BACMID so that we can make sure that our officials are actually protecting us and not protecting the fossil fuel companies. And in order to do this, we'll be doing a power mapping of the air district so that we can find.
There you are, Eduardo. We lost you there for a second.
Oh.
The last two sentences you have, you might want to back up and repeat just your last, whatever you were last saying.
Okay, I was saying that we also need to defund the fossil fuels, and a lot of money is going to support them, and we need to let cow stirs and other people who are sending their money to fossil fuels in hopes of returns. We need to find better ways to do that. We need to boycott the funding of fossil fuels. So I guess at this point we're ready to. I guess we're ready to move on to. Let's see.
Eduardo, could I just say a few things about the defunding the fossil fuel industry workshop?
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't short shrift the group there. So we have 3 topics we're going to cover. Daphne Wisham and John Tuffreth from the Center for Sustainable Economy are going to talk about risk bonds and how these can be used to make the refineries and the other fossil fuel industries actually, I'll put my screen on here, I just realized, make the fossil fuel industry be responsible for the possible disasters. As we all know, the Richmond fire that happened in 2012 had huge consequences, but they didn't have any insurance or anything to pay for any of those consequences. Whereas these risk bonds could put that money up front and make sure that they have it there for these disasters. We're also going to be talking about Sandy Emerson from Fossil Free California is going to be talking about divesting from all the big fossil fuel industries, especially in our pension funds, but also in other city holdings and other monies that the banks and so forth have. And then the third one is stop the money pipeline. As we know, these big banks are still investing in these stupid pipelines, and it's important that we put pressure on them and try to get that flow of money out of the whole economic system. So those are the 3 speakers we're having in that workshop. I just wanted to make sure that that they didn't get missed there. So, and Eduardo is going to actually monitor that or moderate that panel too. So thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you. So you froze a little bit on that. So
Oh, sorry.
no, it's I think it's my connection. It's not.
Yeah, it's just you, Eduardo. No, it is. It is. It's your connection is frozen.
Excuse me.
So moving right along, we're going to head into our panel. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just need to jump in here for a second. This is Janet Johnson with the Environmental Justice Panel, and somehow I managed in my introduction to skip over LaDonna Williams. LaDonna Williams, who is a 30-year activist and environmental justice advocate in Vallejo. And she will be speaking about her experience in that work. Excuse me, LaDonna, I apologize. Thank you.
Probably you should just leave a few minutes for all the workshops to end and for everyone to go to the kitchen and make it to this room.
Okay, so who's going to report out for decommissioning refineries?
Greg, do you want to spearhead that?
Yusra did a great job. And so I was actually hoping, Yusra, that you might want to take a shot at this.
Sure.
Or maybe we can tag team it.
Definitely.
We had a really good, fairly short panel where we ended up Steve Gary, from a worker's perspective, Claire from really progressive economist perspective, and me from kind of like a science guy in the trenches, seemed to paint a picture that there was a lot of agreement and the richness in different perspectives. The question and answers really showed me that people grasp deeply that kind of where I first started with this, that there's a this isn't really about the science. It's about facts that we can use. Yeah, but it's not, and that's, a piece of it. This is about how do we figure out how to deal with the realities that each of us face and come together and organize in a united way to do what we all need to do for all of us. And the panel suggested 3 possible actions. One, and just briefly, just acknowledge that the most feasible way to have a livable climate requires as one essential component that we start now so that we can gradually decommission refineries and do it in a just way that can bring everyone together. That we, as local governments, consider publicly counting up all of the oil-dependent tax and jobs base, which will be different in each community. So, and do it publicly so that we can support real effective local planning for a just transition, and that we consider just transition bonds, or basically polluter pays up front, oil companies pay up front for not just cleaning up the dirt, but also cleaning up the mess they left in our economies. And that's just transition bonds. Yusra?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think really stood out was the fact that this issue is varying depending on whether we're dealing with a city level concern or a state level one. And there were really great points that were brought up in terms of how this varies across different counties. So for example, Contra Costa or even the LA County, and how can we apply some of these strategies right here in the SF Bay Area region. Another really important thing that I'd love to end on is the fact that the election is coming up really soon. And it's important to keep our elected officials accountable, and especially keep them in that conversation when we are talking about decommissioning oil refineries. It's a really important issue, and I think a really big one that's going to have a huge impact this November.
Thank you. So are we ready to move on to Bay Area air quality and environmental justice?
Herb Bairstock is going to report back.
Yeah, thanks very much. Our topic, as you see, is, and we can't breathe an environmental justice. And we had 4 breakout groups that met. I think all of them contributed significantly. We had, in effect, 4 kind of comprehensive issues that we dealt with the overall problem, policies, methodology, and community organization to deal with the problems of air quality and environmental justice. There was a considerable discussion about AB 617, and I want to come back to that because that is a mechanism in place. But I wanted to point out that there were kind of 4 overview points and then 2 specific communities where we had examples of trying to cope with the problem of achieving environmental justice while tackling the air quality problem. So the first thing that was emphasized is that we need to know the nature of the problem. So there was considerable discussion, very rich inputs about the measures of the problem and the methodologies, and to be sure to tackle where there are risks and vulnerabilities and the disparities, especially among people who are of color. That led to also some very important points about, there you go. Sorry about that. So you can see me too. There were very important discussions about racism and the systemic racism. This was very passionately presented and reflected in the groups and the inequities. And of course, if we don't have good measures, we can't also link the action to where there are people who are most vulnerable. Clearly, it does affect minority groups, people of color, and Blacks. The third point is about the process, not just the problem, but the process. And the focus was on community organizing and participatory organizing. And we had forceful interventions from Miss Margaret and a couple other groups, Janet's as well, on the importance of involving all stakeholders from the beginning to invest in good preparations first to make sure that the voices are represented and people don't feel excluded, or it's going to be very difficult to get to the solution of the problems, even at the local community level. So these frontline communities have got to be represented. One of the groups came back and said we obviously also need to involve the enterprises and of course the regulatory agencies. So that led to a discussion that was picked up in several of the groups and in the plenary presentation about AB 617, which is of course the air quality legislation passed by the state of California to take action in 30 different districts in California. 2 of these are in our Bay Area. And we were fortunate to have representatives from both Richmond and West Oakland who elaborated on their struggles and their processes, both in terms of how they related to these overall issues, as well as the steps they took. But there was serious criticism of the shortcomings of AB 16, while at the same time recognizing that, you know, it was a step forward. But the shortcomings included the problem of who to involve in the process and not to exclude parties, including especially people of color. It's felt that you have to define the roles and responsibilities of everybody in the communities to take action and to maintain the group throughout the whole process to achieve its goals and monitor its success. So the process as I said, in Richmond and West Oakland was addressed, and that certainly shed light on the successes and the shortcomings and problems that need to be worked on. That's an effort at a summary.
Good, thank you, Herb. And again, Herb, that was the panel. What was the panel name, please?
This was the I Can't Breathe, Environmental Justice and Air Quality.
Good, thank you. Who would like to go next? What panel would like to report out next?
Andres, you want to split it?
Sure. Yeah. You want to start?
Sorry. So
your panel, please.
So yeah, the name of the panel was Power Mapping the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. So we basically had an information presentation about kind of what the air district is, who populates it, what they do, and how they do it. How this agency that oversees the air quality for the whole 9 county Bay Area, how they impact climate, kind of a bunch of political machinations that went on to blunt their ability to help us on climate, how they impact community health and particulate matter, and then particular justice fights on PM and other refinery and fossil fuel infrastructure issues, particularly focusing on a current rule to reduce PM from refineries, and then kind of operationalizing how to make change there with Andres.
Yeah, so we started out with an examination of who are the members of the executive committee and the stationary source committee, and where they're from and some of their background in terms of their voting patterns and historic support or non-support of our issues. And then we broke out into, as well as we looked at their relative power within the different committees, also based on their different affiliations. And for example, identifying John Joya, supervisor from West Contra Costa County, is also on the CARB board. So those kind of issues. But then we got into breakout groups based on region. We broke out into East Bay, South Bay, San Francisco and the Peninsula, and North Bay. And we had discussions around who were the members within those regions, that we needed to start setting up meetings with those folks so that we can advocate to them about our position on a number of the rules, particularly the ones that Jed identified, the fluid catalytic cracker unit rule, also the methane rule and the particulate matter rule as the key items that we need to be advocating for. And I know, and so there were different sizes of groups. There was more of us in the East Bay than the other regions, but what we know we're going to do is that There's still 94 people on this Zoom. And so we're going to be reaching out to everybody who has been a part of this to join us once we start setting up meetings with these elected officials. And we know that different people have different levels of experience of advocacy. Some of us have spoken at public meetings and city council meetings, board of supervisors, school district, things like that. Other people have had more direct lobbying advocacy kind of experience, one-on-one meetings with elected officials and their staff. And that's the phase we're moving into and preparation for the public meetings in October and November, the public meeting of the Stationary Source Committee in October, and then the board as a whole in November, particularly around the FCCU rules. So this is not the end. Those of us who are part of this are going to be a core that will build out with the rest of you to make this happen so that we can get those victories that Jed identified for us.
Thank you. The next group is the how to defund the fossil fuel industry. And there were actually two aspects of it. One of them was risk bonds and the other one was divesting. So we'll have different individuals answering to that. But let's see, I guess it was, who was going to speak to this?
Well, Dan was maybe going to report about the risk bonds. Just to say we had sorry, my computer's freaking out, so I can't turn my video on. Hopefully you can hear me. We had 3 great presentations about risk bonds, about divestment, and about direct action and getting in the street and stopping the money pipeline. And so maybe Dan can summarize the breakout group based on the risk bonds. Maybe Dan is not here any longer.
Well, I can chime in. So the risk bonds, it's actually a twofold thing. One, the first thing we need to do is to stop the further expansion of the fossil fuel structures, and then the risk bonds would actually require the fossil fuel companies to invest in a bond that would cover any cost, from various events, such as earthquake, fires, and there were point source costs and there were non-point source costs. And some of the non-point source costs would be like climate change and health cost would be something that would float between point source cost, which is actually due to an explosion or some other catastrophe, and non-point source costs in terms of medical costs would be the overall effects of the polluting that the industries do. There was also an aspect of a surcharge, which would go to the cities to help them mitigate various costs to transition to a just economy. So one of the issues is also transparency. There is, we have a right to know the extent of the bonding, which is something that is difficult for cities to obtain. So that would have to go into the language of the bond regulations. So yeah, so we need to make sure that any of the stranded assets are accounted for, and that the cost goes to the fossil fuel industry and not to the taxpayers, which is the way it's set up currently. So the next person who is going to do the next aspect, defunding. Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
We talked about the divestment movement, generally speaking, and the fact that it has grown to represent $14.6 trillion in assets worldwide. Over 1,200 institutions have pledged to divest, and thousands of individuals. These divestment pledges are in various sectors. Pension funds are about 13% of these divestment pledges, and they're mostly outside of the US. Pension funds are among the most conservative investors. They're so determined to remain invested in fossil fuels that they will become holders of last resort for all these bankrupt companies, all these toxic assets. The IPCC says that there should be at least $300 billion annually divested from fossil fuel extraction and from fossil fuel utilities, and at least $1 trillion or better $2 trillion should be invested in clean energy in order to speed the transition. Fossil fuel companies, of course, are part of the problem. Their business model depends on relentlessly exploring for new reserves. And they have already identified 7 times more reserves than can be burned and still keep the planet below 2 degrees centigrade, much less at below 1.5 degrees centigrade. The fossil fuel companies and the extractive economy aren't going to be part of the solution. Divestment sends a market signal that will help to raise awareness that they're part of the problem. All on their own, fossil fuels as a share of the S&P 500 have declined remarkably. They're less than 5% of the S&P 500 now. Used to be a full 29% or so in the 1980s. So fossil fuels are, of course, toxic for the planet, and they're also a really bad investment. If you had put money into an oil and gas fund at this point in time, 10 years ago, at this point in time, you would have lost 69%. If you just invested in the regular S&P 500, you would have gained 46%. Pension funds refuse divestment because they believe they have to stay invested in the whole market. One big fund, the biggest in the country, is CalPERS, the Public Employee Retirement System. They have $400 billion assets under management. They have at least $30 billion invested in fossil fuels throughout the whole value chain, not just producers, but utilities, distribution, oil field services, all of that. I mentioned a study that we did that showed that CalPERS would have been $11.9 billion richer if it had divested from fossil fuels 10 years ago. So that's hypothetical. But in terms of absolute value destruction, it's lost money year on year from its investments in fossil fuels, which tend to remain irrationally constant. For the fracking companies' bankruptcies, CalPERS will get back pennies on the dollar. They're kind of last in line in terms of creditors for, recovering from these bankruptcies. So our campaigns seek to get the stakeholders of CalPERS to advocate for divestment, the retirees, the members, and beneficiaries. Even better, cities can advocate for divestment, and a handful of cities in California have passed divestment resolution. Cities are major stakeholders in CalPERS budget, and for the cities who are not in CalPERS, they're major stakeholders in their own municipal pensions as employers. So cities resolutions should carry a lot of weight. And since 2013, only about 14 cities have passed divestment resolutions. I think it's time to get some really strong language into your climate emergency declarations and collect the whole set of city resolutions throughout California. Their voices will be important. CalPERS and other pension funds typically are not controlled in any meaningful way by their stakeholders. CalPERS is not controlled by the governor, it's not controlled by the legislature, it's a plenary body with independent authority over its investments. So you have to get the board to change its mind. And getting the board to change its mind is clearly a long process. We've been at it for 7 years. So I think it's time for cities to roll up and start appearing in the investment committee meetings. They have clearly a huge stake in this issue. There are resources for cities to divest. The C40 cities movement that was started in 2018 by New York and London, and member cities in California or Los Angeles and San Francisco, they have a whole divestment toolkit. New York City helped put this together, and New York City is in fact divesting from fossil fuels. There's also resources with California elected officials, and there are resources on the Fossil Free California website. That was us. Check.
Okay, my computer is really unstable, so I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to do this, but I will make an attempt to report on our third breakout room, which was about stopping the money pipeline. And we focused on how important it is right now to build coalition with social justice organizations and other organizations in the climate sector in order to really build the movement. And also that corporations really are a very important focus of the work that needs to be done right now. It was noted about, like Unilever promising to clean up their palm oil supply chain, which by 2020, which they haven't done, and various things like that, and how people on the streets and also doing work within the organizations, the inside the building and the outside the building, working together to move these corporations to meet the demands that we need. And yeah, I just really want to put out a strong invite to everyone as a next step to come to the We Can't Breathe Bayview Hunters Point action next Tuesday. This is a really strong intersection of climate and social justice, and it's going to be COVID safe, car caravan, meeting in Bayview at 3rd and Carroll. So if everybody can come out to that, that's a great next step for us to really show the strength in the Bay Area for support around this, and also to get in touch with us at safe, socially distant street actions that are focused on art or a message about all of this around BlackRock or Liberty Mutual, the ones that are really the Chase, the ones that are really the key companies within these industries that we want to affect right now. So yeah, hopefully we can all move this forward together. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So I guess we can move on to Jack. Jack, you want to tell us about the next webinar?
Yeah, just a really quick 1 minute to say that I'm really excited. Our next webinar, mark your calendars, September 25th. It's the last Friday of the month. We're holding these summits. And this is going to be on the theme of all electric infrastructure, electrifying everything. We've got, we've talked about the healthy cities in the first summit. We talked about no more fossil fuels today. And next time we're going to talk about clean energy, making sure that we move to 100% renewable energy, that we eliminate fossil fuels from transportation and from buildings. So we've got Mark Jacobson is going to give the keynote speech to kick things off. We've got Panama Bartholomew from the Decarbonization Coalition, as well as Kate Harrison, your colleague, Cheryl, from the Berkeley City Council, who spearheaded the all-electric new buildings ordinance in Berkeley. And we're going to be talking about microgrids and electric vehicles and the city roadmaps. We want to get the cities like Berkeley and other San Anselmo have really good roadmaps for converting their vehicles to electric. And so we want to give them a chance to share their best practices so that we can get all the cities in the Bay Area to get on board. So I'm really looking forward to it, and still looking for a few more speakers and ideas. So if you have them, please email me. I'll put my address in the chat, and feel free to get in touch with me, and looking forward to seeing you next month.
Great, thank you. So Cheryl,
I just wanted, thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Eduardo. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone that was here today. We still have over 92 people on the Zoom. That's amazing. So thank you so much, Amos, and everyone on the steering committee and in the task force. This has been the second incredible summit series that we've had, and we look forward to seeing you on the September 25th. Have a blessed day. Stay healthy. Be safe. Physically distance. Wear your mask. Thank you, everyone. And it's good to see people that I haven't seen. Dr. Janice Kirsch, I remember you were at the climate emergency declaration meeting. This is amazing. Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed day, okay? All right.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. Bye-bye.